Michael Jackson died with no will. Prince died with no will. Aretha Franklin died with no will. Last week I had to bury Angie Stone with no will. You got to make sure that you are leaving something for your children. Dr. Schaub, 87% of black children don't know the names of their great-grandparents. Why? Because they didn't leave them nothing. Because we haven't created any legacy for those that are coming behind. Y'all got to get your stuff in order. Y'all ain't saying that. I said, you better get your business in. Oh, you too old to not have stuff in order. Come on now. GoFundMe is not a plan. You got to have a plan in order. I don't care where you work or what you do. Make sure that you got your paperwork. The book of Proverbs says a good man leaves an inheritance. You got to make sure that you are leaving something for your children.
What's happening? People don't respect legacy. When people have that concept of a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, most times people flip that and say, you're supposed to leave an inheritance to your children. And that's how that normally messes up the biblical inheritance part. And this is why I'm going to say this. You don't owe your kids an inheritance. You owe your grandkids an inheritance. You know, that's what he was trying to say. The problem is parents trusted their children to be good stewards of the inheritance to the grandkids. And normally that doesn't happen. Normally they mess it up. Now, this happens when people in poverty. This happens with people middle class. This happens with people who are rich. So people don't want to deal with that concept because your parents raised you to become an adult. And when you were able to stand on your 2 feet and you started to have a family, your concern should have been taking care of your family. And what happens is people's parents die and they leave them things. And then it goes, well, they left me. This is my mom. This is my dad. They left this to me. So I can do whatever I want. And then subsequently, you normally blow that money on dumb stuff, or you get rid of the property and then blow that money on dumb stuff. This is a general thing that happens generally. It ain't even got to be a racial thing. And then when the kids become adults and they're like, yo, like, we don't have nothing. And then that same parent is like, I had to do this and I had to do that. You gotta, you're grown. You need to do it yourself. And I say that to say, because this has evolved over the years where you've seen grandparents die, parents inherit what grandparents left, parents blow what the grandparents gave, quote unquote, them, and then the parents in their old age want to depend on the kids, or when they die, they leave that kid nothing. You get what I'm saying? I don't have nothing. I never got nothing from nobody. Like, and I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen numerous times. Let's just say it that way. And so when we had this conversation about older generations not looking out for the youth, in a general sense, it's not true. In a general sense, it was probably your parents that messed that off. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, and I say it this way too, and sometimes when it comes to the married part, what happens is the surviving spouse, if there's no will, gets no will, or even just any direction, right? They get the pretty much everything, and then they do with it what they want. You get what I'm saying? And part of that would have been inheritance. And even if, and this is where people mess this stuff up, even when people don't have a will, generally they have instructions if they don't have a will. And there's, because people, like, unless somebody like dies like suddenly, but generally people get older and it's like, look, I ain't got that many years left, and if they don't have will, I need this is this here, this here, this here. I need you to do this with this with this, and this with this. And then, and what normally happens in those situations is um that older person talks to multiple people, like, this is what's going to go on, this is what I said should go on, this is what I said should happen for you, this is what happened for them, this is what happened for them. And then usually you that's how you wind up with that money fight that goes to secession sometimes, or that's how people have a falling out and they say it's really over money. Generally, it's not really over money. It's not just over money. It's over your disrespect to somebody's last wishes. So when they say, like, people don't know what's going on, when they say people don't know what's going on, they do, generally. And you wind up falling out with people because you know what you were told, they know what they were told, and people just go, this is my moment to be selfish, and it's all about me. So fall out. Then you have the situation with the grandkids thing when grandkids may not be alive. So when the kids are not born, there's nothing to pass down. And sometimes people make wills and the kids are young and they don't kind of redo them like the grandparents. And that leads to the same scenario. And other times, um, how can I say this properly? Other times, people don't realize, like, the situation where if you have multiple kids with multiple people, it's like, oh my goodness, now how are we gonna do this? I was trying to be gentle when I said that, but that's a whole nother story, because sometimes you know them all, sometimes they find out, in different ways, but that's a thing. So then they leave it to the parent, and the parent, like I said, messes it off. But the general inheritance, the legacy of somebody, um, people don't put the practical application of how it went down, and people, like, use the biblical thing and pervert it, because they say children's children, but then people go to children, and it's like, some of y'all don't realize this, but sometimes you over invest in your kids, and then it and then when they become adults and they have kids, you're kind of behind and leaving stuff to the grandkids. You get what I'm saying? And sometimes you have the kids that um too comfortable asking their parents for stuff at an adult age. So by the time, so they really eat into the grandkids' inheritance, because they always, not necessarily always, but they're in need far too much. Could you do this for me? Could you do that for me? And it's like, yo. So what winds up happening is, like I said before, it's not that people don't leave anything. It's that people um, either eat away at it before that moment is over, before those people pass away, or when they pass away, they just do the wrong thing with it. And the thing is, people don't count that. Like, people don't go, oh yeah, my parent had, let's just say, tens of thousands, hundreds of $1,000s saved when they were alive, right? And then it's like, oh, but when they died, they only had, maybe 10,000 or 30,000 of that money left. And it's like, oh, they ain't really leave me nothing. It's like, oh, you ask for this, you ask for this, you ask for this, you ask, and these was all big purchases. It ate away at that. And sometimes y'all have kids and y'all use your kids as a like, man, I can't have, the grandkid, your grandkids would be messed up. And it's like, oh, okay, because you don't want to fully stand on your own 2 feet. You kind of lay back on the grandparents before they pass. That's the same thing I was saying about like the homes and stuff. Uh, and like the worst, I ain't gonna say the worst. One of the wildest scenarios I saw was um, parent passes away. The children, okay, in order, great grandparent. Let me do that. I can say my great grandmother passed away. She had 3 kids, 4. I'm sorry. Um, one, the 2 adults very responsible. One adult drug problem party animal. Other adult went to prison for like 30 to 40 years. So the goal was to give the because they were still in prison when she passed, give that one the house, that at least the house, when so he could have somewhere to stay when he got out. Because everybody else, I'm talking about 50s and 60s, right? So everybody was in their 50s and 60s is what I'm trying to say. So party animal, drug addict fights for the house. He got kids, multiple places. So it's like, okay, if this fool gets his house, make sure his kids get this house because he got too many kids. And at the time, he was like 60 something, and he had a 2-year-old. It was crazy. So he gets the house, free and clear, sells the house for like an $80,000 truck, moves into an apartment complex, and like 2 years, buys some jewelry, you know, not rapper style jewelry, but but old people gaudy jewelry. Let's just do it that way. Um, and a couple years later dies, and then and his kids that are grown are like, what the fuck? The brother that was out is out of prison now, like, what the and is some of y'all don't know this. Like in New Orleans, they have duplexes. So sometimes they're 2 stories, and sometimes they're side by side. So he sold that, and then it was basically in the family in a sense. And then once again, another family member sold that. So they sold both sides now. And what did they buy? Because I gotta say this: one side was my great grandmother's house, and the other side was my grandmother's house. So when my grandmother passed, so they sold that, and then bought some cars, some clothes, went on trips and stuff like that. And really, that person wound up living with people because they just couldn't get a place to stay because they wasn't an adult. But they were the oldest, my grandmother's oldest child. So I'm trying, so that messed that up. And I'm not saying this like it's just a thing. I'm using my family as an example, but I know bunch of stories, but that is a normal habit. And and now you wind up with, because even let me back up. Even when my grandmother passed, she left quote unquote me money, right? Told me and everything. My father told him and everything. My father, like, your grandmother, da 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 da. But when she passed in succession, my dad decided, F you, generally. Not generally, that's what he did. So ultimately was broke at the end of the day because, you know, dope fiend party animal too. Him and the great uncle very similar. Um, and I say that, and I'm gonna end it with this. That's the other thing. Sometimes because there's not a will, you wind up in a raisin in the sun situation where the most irresponsible child gets first crack at what to do with the inheritance to kind of like you gonna finally make good of yourself, and that don't ever really work, you know. But I'm gonna leave it at that. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.